first time ever.
Hear you loud and clearly.
And it was going place.
That stuff's great.
But the game is not a roguelike.
Boomer shooter.
Bang.
Hello, this is John St. John, and you're listening to KWEP In the Keep, bringing you all the hits from the finest in the world of gaming and entertainment. Now sit back and relax as the drowned god Cthulhu lulls your mind with the tastiest talk in town.
Welcome to another chapter of In the Keep podcast. I'm your very own prophet of the drowned god, the Motherlode. The Keep is a collective of gaming enthusiasts compelled by the drowned god Cthulhu to frag and jib one another into oblivion for all eternity. Awesreek, how the hell are you?
I'm alright.
It's been a while.
It's been chaos is what it's been. I probably have almost as much, if not more, to talk about than I did the last time I came on. Which last time went for about an hour and a half, if I remember correctly. So
Something like that. Yeah.
I might I'll try to shorten it up, but I'm just gonna adjust my camera here. There we go.
So let's bring people kind of back up to speed a little bit here. Like the last time you were on, you were like, as we said at Realms Deep 2021, it was like, okay, this game might happen one day. And then the next thing I know, it's like you've got a publishing deal and you're fucking like the biggest thing ever. And like G-Man and Civi are blowing you up all over the place. Like I have to be honest, like I usually think like I have a good eye for like what's going to be kick ass or whatever, but like I did not see that come in as quickly as it did. And like, what's that whole process been like for you? Like, how are you feeling?
Well,
are you okay?
No. No, so to actually go into maybe to set the stage a bit better, where we were around the time we did the last interview was I had me and Elijah were working part-time on the game, and we were working full-time jobs. So I was working at a custom fiberglass parts manufacturer, which sucked. And my buddy Elijah was working at an IT tech type phone store, which also sucked. And we had just released the demo around that time. And I think we were starting to gain a lot of traction kind of in the week or two following that. I mean, like the first week was pretty busy overall, but like the kind of what came after was just overwhelming because we had, especially around this time, the demo was only available on our Discord, so we had people piling into our Discord, and I was trying to manage a community that was going from 300 people that had slowly accumulated over the course of like 4 years to 2,000 in the course of like 3 weeks. And we didn't have any moderators at that time. It was just me. And I was trying to manage the community and go to my day job and work on the game. And it was hell. So I think then Realms Deep probably happened shortly after this period because it was like September, and I think we released the demo in July.
That lines up, something like that.
Yeah. By this time, G-Man Lives had covered the game. Civi had been sharing it around on Twitter. Civi was actually, I think, one of the first people who played it because I was chatting with him, DMs on Twitter. And then Realms Deep happened, and it was that was really fun, really stressful, and a lot over the course of a few days. Thankfully, I didn't have to work any of those days, so I was able to be there for the entire event. But we were kind of just at this point emotionally where all we wanted to do was work on the game, but most of our time was being consumed by our day jobs.
Mhm.
And by the time we'd actually get home, we were tired and exhausted and couldn't get much done. And especially considering I also had to manage the community, try and find people who were going to be moderators and all that stuff. And it was it was certainly a very difficult time for us. And then Realms Deep happened, and after Realms Deep, Fred, the head of 3D Realms, in the Discord, he was like, "Hey, we can't help any of you guys. We have way too many projects going on right now." Which for me was a really big disappointment because our composer, Michael Markey, he works with 3D Realms, and he was telling me, "Oh, I'm gonna try and pitch this to them and potentially break us in." And he was pretty confident because they were really liking it. He was pretty confident that they were going to be able to help us out. So when Fred said that, I was like, "Oh, okay." But a part of that same thread, he said, "Well, we can't help you, but we have a business partner called 1C Entertainment, and they are looking for games to pick up. And so we're going to kind of shuffle some of you guys toward them if you guys need help or whatever with your game." And I was like, I reached out to Fred. I was like, "Yeah, I'd be interested in doing that." And I asked him what we needed to get together to kind of help get increase the odds of us getting picked up by them. And he said, "I'll put a game pitch together and all, and yada yada yada." And so I did that. I presented it to Fred, and he was like, "Yeah, that looks pretty good." And he said, "I'm gonna try and get in touch with the folks from 1C." And before he could even do that, I think either the same day or the day after, the folks from 1C called me, and they were like, "Hey, we want to have a meeting with you and your team." And I was like, "Okay." and I got together with Elijah, and we set some time aside for that. And then we had a meeting, I think the week after or during the weekend. And probably about 2-3 minutes into the meeting, after we had introduced ourselves, they were like, "Yeah, so we want to publish Viscerafest." Which was a really which I think kind of took us aback, but it was really exciting for the both of us, especially because financially speaking, they were going to kind of help boost us along, which was kind of what we needed because we were really looking for a way to get up and out of the rut of having to work day jobs and also on the game, because that's not ideal. Because those two fight each other all the time. I was around that time. I was getting up at 5 a.m. and probably working about till 2 or 3 in the morning, just on the game. It was not fun. So I was always functioning on less than ideal amounts of sleep. Except for the weekends, which was I got to sleep as much as I want, but usually wasn't enough. But anyways, so over the course of the next several months, we were having talks back and forth with them, just figuring out the business side of the deal. And that went on till around about December, when we finalized our agreement and we basically signed on to working with 1C. I don't think we announced it till February, but we were by that point locked in and basically working with 1C Entertainment, and they just wanted to wait until they had something to announce to share the fact that they were publishing the game, because they wanted to make sure news got out as much as possible. In that sort of time period as well, we were looking. We were basically taking the demo and just kind of bringing it up to a higher standard of quality, trying to make it as accessible and as basically just adding quality of life features that most people expect games to have that it didn't, because it was a really early demo. Like, we didn't have difficulty settings early on. We didn't have options. I mean, like, we had a few, but, like, not enough that would be, like, you know, what people would expect or want from a game. So we were doing that, and then over the course of the first couple of months, it was kind of just working on continuing work on Chapter 1 and finishing that stuff up. And then we ran into some issues with my bank, because my bank basically they refused to take any payments that 1C was sending us. Now, the first couple of times, it was my fault. I had given some incorrect information mostly because my bank's website is poorly laid out and I had no idea what anything was supposed to be. But I had given some wrong information, and so I took some time to correct it. And then they kept rejecting the payments, so we weren't getting crap from 1C for about 5 months in terms of what payments we were supposed to be getting. And by this time, I had also moved to being part-time. Elijah had completely quit his job, and Elijah was needing me to pay him. So he was financially struggling at this point. And I was doing fine because I still had a day job, but it was still really stressful because I was like, I need to pay him, and I can't get any money because frickin' my bank's being stupid.
Dude, I had the worst time just getting my plane tickets for Realms Deep. I don't even know what a fucking IBAN or a SWIFT is, but like, God help me. Let's just roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah, no. So I ended up, I got a different bank. I basically moved everything over from the bank I was using prior to a new bank, and thankfully we started getting paid 6 months later after we were already several months deep into missed payments. So we started trucking along, and then I think I'm just trying to remember the months of the year in my head. I think we were supposed to originally release the early access in April, and I think it got pushed back to May. I know it was delayed by a month. I just don't remember the exact month.
It seems like that would have been the time frame because I remember it being around my birthday.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I mean,
actually,
I'm a little disappointed, but whatever.
It got pushed back several times, actually, because it was supposed to be, like I said, I think it was supposed to be in April. Got pushed back to May 10th. And the thing is that whatever month it actually was, and people will know because of what I'm about to say, Resident Evil 8 was coming out like right around like 3 days, like either after or before Viscerafest. And our publisher came to us and they were like, hey, so yeah, we know that we rescheduled the date and everything, but we want to reschedule it again because we think that from a business standpoint, it will be much better and you'll be able to gain much more traction in this period of the month as opposed to this period of the month. So I think we got bumped back to like the 20th, 26th.
It was May 20th.
Okay, yeah. So we got bumped back to May 20th because unlike either May 10th or whenever Resident Evil 8 was releasing, they didn't tell us that. I'm assuming that's why. It sounds like a pretty reasonable explanation in my head because we'd be competing with Resident Evil 8. But yeah, then the early access released. And that was a mad dash because basically, like I said, I was working part-time and that was still too much for me. I was still like completely overwhelmed and stressed. And within this period, I basically completely mentally and emotionally shut down. Just because of like how overwhelmed I was with what I needed to do on the game, what was going on in my personal life, what was going on with work. So as a result, I kind of just I completely shut down. And I ended up talking to my parents, and I was like, I can't keep doing this. and they recommended that I just quit my job altogether. Because they said, like, not if there's going to be a time in your life where you take chances and you pursue career ventures that may be risky, that would be the time to do it. Don't put yourself through hell just to have money, because I'm living with my parents right now. Because of that, I decided to quit my job, and that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life. I'm so much more relaxed now, so much less overwhelmed because of that. Not having to go into work 4 days a week and having that cut into development time. Because the other thing, too, is we had set up milestones, as you do when you're working on a game with a publisher. And our publisher, I don't think, and neither us nor our publisher really had a good idea of how long things were actually going to take, which is one of the reasons why the EA was delayed. So we were basically crunching like hell to get this done, and I was working the part-time job. And I probably quit my job about 2 months prior to us releasing in early access. One level that I was working on had taken significantly longer than it was supposed to, and then I basically had to cram a level and an entire hub space into 1 month, which was not fun. Because basically the level I'd been working on prior was only supposed to take a half a month, and it took a full month. Yep. And the other half of that month was supposed to be dedicated to the hub stuff. So we were doing a mad dash to finish the boss, and I was just like, hey, we're not going to make this on time. So our publisher was like, okay, we'll rearrange dates and stuff. And it's probably the best decision we made. But following that, we released into early access, and the rest is kind of a blur after that. I remember, let's see. Civi played it, and he sort of threw it into, well, he had done a video prior to us releasing the early access, I think.
Right, there was the grab bag thing.
Yeah, he talked about the demo and that. He did play it and share it on Twitter, but he hasn't done a video on Chapter 1 yet, which I don't expect him to, because knowing Civi, he typically waits, nowadays anyways, he waits until something is fully out. Like, he does like one video to kind of preamble, like talking about it as it's like in progress, and then he does a video on when it's finished, just because like he's got so much stuff to cover nowadays that I'm sure trying to keep up with everything that's updating on a week-to-week basis would be a nightmare, especially with how big things have gotten in the indie shooter scene lately. So Civi did a video on the demo. I sent a build to G-Man Lives, and that went interestingly. So for context, G-Man Lives had not played the demo since the very, very, very early builds I had sent him that he did a video on. And around that time, we didn't have difficulty settings. And Viscerafest, when it didn't have difficulty settings, was very stupidly easy, because I was told when we were passing around internal builds that the game was very, very hard. So, as a result, I kind of panic nerfed things at the last minute before we released the demo. And as a result, the demo's balancing was really off in a lot of places. But basically, the demo was pretty stupidly easy. At least in my opinion, it was. I'm sure other people would disagree. People did keep dying to the Thunderbirds. So he hadn't played since then. And so when he did, finally, after so much had changed, he didn't have a great time. I thought he wanted to kill me, to be honest. He was very angry with me, and which was weird because over the course of the next couple of days, he kind of completely changed his tune because somebody asked him on Twitter whether or not he liked it, and he said he did. He thought it was amazing. So I'm very confused what happened and kind of scared. But yeah, no, he had some choice words for me. I'll just say that. But moving on from there, I mean, we've mostly just been working on Chapter 2 recently, which has been a drug trip. Chapter 2 is... I think the best way I can put it is that I've been planning, especially in regards to story stuff, I've been planning for a lot of this stuff so long that to actually see it come to fruition and to like actually be like physically there and like I can see how the end result is starting to look. It's very, very weird and sentimental for me because it's like this stuff has been stuck in my head for so long, and it's only really been loosely planned out for so long that it's like, man, I almost feel like I can see the end of the tunnel now. So I guess that's your catch up.
Well, first of all, you've come a very, very long way as a public speaker since the first time we spoke.
Yeah, a bit. I've had to talk to a lot more people.
It's a thing. It's like, I don't know. You catch people on that initial, like right when the wave's about to break, which I'm just now starting to see that. I've been doing this for 2 years or so. And I'm now starting to see that return on investment where it's like, oh shit, Awesreek wants to talk to me. I'm awesome. Like that feels so good. But yeah, like I catch guys like you, like right when the waves is like about to come, and then I just see it break on the shore, and it's amazing. It's just like such a fucking beautiful feeling to see people like you kind of get to fulfill their dreams in a way.
Yeah.
Even if that does mean living with your parents, no offense.
Yeah, I mean, I thankfully I have a pretty good relationship with my parents.
Yeah.
They've been.
I'm looking forward to going back to live with my mom one day.
They've been incredibly supportive of me. Obviously we don't always agree on everything, but I'd say for the most part we have a pretty understanding relationship with one another. But yeah, no, I mean, it's honestly, like what I've said is kind of probably just scratching the surface because I think I did have more planned to say, but it's
okay.
It's eluding me. It's eluding me right now.
We're only like 21 minutes in. We got plenty of time.
Yeah. But I suppose the next thing would be to talk about Chapter 2 because, oh boy, and trying not to spoil things.
So, I mean, in Chapter 1, we kind of follow Caroline through what seems to be a very simple boomer shooter start, right? It's like, okay, we got a few levels here, we got some enemies, blah blah blah, and then you go full fucking like a medieval blast off into the ethereal universe, and then I'm just, all right, what is going on? And yeah, so carry us on from there.
So I'm actually so it's actually worth noting so that level, oh god. So that level, C1L6, which is called the Wayward Watchers, that was originally meant to be just a small part of the prior level, Slipgate Central. That was just going to be a brief sequence where you'd like go through the teleporter, a little story bit would play out, and you get a key, and then you go back to kind of the main level, and it'd be like, well, what the heck was that? But over the course of the game's development, whilst it was like in that demo state, a lot of people had really taken a liking to Caroline, and they wanted to know a lot more about her. And financially, we had kind of gotten in a position. What?
I'm sure they do. That's all.
Not like that. A lot of people were very intrigued. Like people were asking me, like, "Well, why does she have the scar? Why, what the hell is going on with her? What's with the intro where she has like 50 tongues that are 70 feet long? Like, what's going on? Who is she?" And originally, that was stuff we were planning to cover, but like we were mostly planning to just hint at it, and like if we got a chance to do another game, maybe we'd actually get to tackling that. But like financially speaking, we had gotten to a point where it was like, oh well, we can kind of afford to do more story-wise than we thought we were going to be able to. Because my prior cutscene artist, who was Sarah Knappin, bless her heart, wonderful woman, was expensive as hell. But she had to step down, and as a result, Gianni, one of our voice actors' wife, she
Get Gianni.
she came in and
That guy. Just so everyone knows. Yes, that guy.
Yes, it's that Gianni.
The meme lord.
Yes. But his wife, she's an artist, and she basically stepped in to kind of take Sarah's place. And actually, just so I don't breeze over her, for a brief stint, we were going to work with Sarah Knappin's sister, Trixie, but she was going through some health issues, and that didn't last very long, unfortunately. But she did do some great character turnaround sheets for us. But anyways, so Mariah Key comes in, and she costs like half the amount that Sarah does. So I was like, oh, well, I'm sitting on a lot more money now. People want to know more about Carolyn, and I honestly, it can be pretty easily worked into this story. Why not? Because we were, like I said, we were already kind of vaguely hinting at this stuff throughout the course of the game anyways. It's just like there were never like any direct, like, it's never something that was directly addressed, despite the fact that it was kind of pivotal to the story in some ways. So I was like, hey, let's tackle Carolyn's backstory and stuff. And so basically, that small section. I think what had happened was that small section. I was working on C-105, and C-105 was already getting so long that I was like, "Screw it, let's just turn that thing into its own level." And in the process, I was like, I was introducing some new elements that hadn't been there prior to that period. And so in a way to sort of like flesh out some of the stuff I was planning to do with Carolyn's backstory and whatnot. And as a result, I was like, hey, let's put this in here. It fits perfectly here. But anyways, so that happened. Sort of going into some of Carolyn's background stuff. And Chapter 2 certainly is kind of like the turning point where you start getting some answers in that regard. Jeez. I'm trying to tread lightly because I feel like... Okay, so Chapter 2 takes place on Earth. And for those of you who don't know, in the nightmare that is Viscerafest's lore, Earth is hell. Basically, Earth has undergone an industrial apocalypse. Most of humanity is extinct. And Earth is now being basically run by a race known as the Deep Ones, which, if anybody's at all familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, then you'll certainly recognize that name, because everybody loves fish people. But yeah, so kind of, I mentioned this in our last interview, but Viscerafest pretty heavily takes from Lovecraft lore. And kind of where that spawned, I would say, was in the book Shadow over Innsmouth. It's like very heavily hinted at that, like, if the Deep Ones wanted to take over Earth, they very easily could. And in Viscerafest, I was like, I don't want humans to be like the dominant race in the universe or whatever, because that's every single freaking sci-fi universe. There's always humans everywhere, and it's really dumb. And it's just not interesting because we're like always the most boring part of any sci-fi universe. So I was like, screw it. Humans are dead. There's like 5 of them left, and they're like kept in breeding camps because they're considered like a race bordering on extinction, and I was like, wouldn't it be interesting if they're basically like treated how like we treat animals here when they're about to die, where it's just like, hey, let's just like I'll pile them in here and try to like bring them back up from like extinction or whatever. But yeah, so the deep ones are basically running Earth. They are there's like a few humans left on Earth, and the deep ones are effectively at odds with them, basically using them as slaves. And throughout the course, they'll kind of see hints and stuff toward that. You get a much better idea of what the United Scientific Conglomerate is. Actually, I think there's a direct answer to what the United Scientific Conglomerate is actually doing in all of that. That happens right toward the end of the chapter. It's set in Japan because, of course, it is. It's my composer said this about a much older build of the game. Back when we had completely different levels and everything, and it was running in that trash engine known as the Blender game engine that I talked about last time. It's such a change of scenery, and we're taking advantage of so much more mechanically now than we had in Chapter 1 that it almost feels like a different game.
Right.
Obviously, a lot of the combat stuff is still relatively similar because, we still have a lot of the same ideologies and same perspectives, but there's just so much more to play with now, and everything looks so different and feels so different atmospherically, it's just, it's significantly more story heavy than Chapter 1 too. Like even within like the environmental stuff. Like one thing that comes to mind is I mentioned like there's a bit of conflict between like cults of Earth and stuff and some deep ones, and there's a scene, or not a scene, but a chunk of a level where you're going through and there's like a little fishing hut that the deep ones have that you can clearly tell has been like raided by some humans. There's like shotgun shells on the floor. There's like blood everywhere. There's like deep ones like hung up on pikes outside. And so we're doing a lot more both in terms of environmental storytelling.
I see what you did there. You said pikes, huh? I'm kidding.
Oh, fish. There's a lot more going on in terms of environmental storytelling, a lot more going on in terms of kind of what we were doing in Chapter 1 with voice acting and the cutscenes. And we just got off of doing some stuff with Jake the Voice. He's going to be in the game.
I got to get Jake back on the show, man. Like because the last time he was on in the Keep, I was just like, dude, your portfolio is insane. And it wasn't even half of what it is now. And he was just like, oh, no. He's like the most self-deprecating little punk I've ever met in my life. He's just, I'm not. And now he's doing, he's doing you guys. He did everything for Hyper Strange this year.
He interviewed Jana Polzin, our voice actor for Carolyn.
He's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he I'm just thinking, oh god. Ooh. This is going to be a lot of really scattered thoughts going on forward.
It's fun. It's the whole point of the show.
But so kind of what we're working on right now is we're in the halfway point of development for Chapter 2. Currently, we're importing third level of Chapter 2, and I am working on the fourth level, which is sort of the first boss level of Chapter 2, because going forward into the latter chapters, we're actually going to kind of Chapter 1 is one boss, Chapter 2 will have two bosses, and Chapter 3 will have three bosses. And I'm working on the first boss level right now. And that will be fun, because we get to introduce our first boss as an enemy type entity. So basically, everybody who loves stuff like Battle Lords will have something to look forward to. except it'll be way more of a pain in the butt than they are.
We're just thinking about the point in Doom where cyber demons become like, oh, there's another fucking oh god, okay, there's three.
They're just everywhere now.
Well, then like Sigil ends with like, okay, cyber demon, check. Spider Mastermind, check. What if we throw both at the same time? Like, oh, come on, John. Like, you're better than this.
I love one of the things I love. Like, I love Sigil so much. I actually have the big box for Sigil. But one of the things
to you, huh?
one of the things I love that Sigil does is that whenever they throw cyber demons out there, there's usually like a teleporter hidden somewhere in the level that you can use to telefrag them. So, but like they don't expect you to actually kill the cyber demons. They're treated more like giant mobile turrets.
It's almost a throwback to Shub-Niggurath from Quake, right? Where the
not
whole
really.
point
Shub-Niggurath and Quake doesn't really do anything.
Well, the point being that you're intended to find the route.
Oh
kill.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's not as simple as like shoot to kill, and like your instinct in Sigil or in any Doom thing is to cyber demon. Okay, circle strafe and kill, and you can go that route, but you're intended to find this alternative way. This means.
Well, another thing I really love that it kind of makes that more difficult in Sigil is Sigil kind of takes place. Not takes place. It very heavily utilizes very claustrophobic level design, and one of the things I like about very claustrophobic level design is that it effectively forces people to be much more conscious of how they're moving in the play space. Mm-hmm. One of the things with like big open arenas and whatever, as fun as they can be, is that like effectively the act of moving throughout them becomes kind of mindless. You're just because like you can do anything. Like you can go anywhere. It doesn't matter. Just hop around, just jump around, just run around, circle, strafe, whatever. Like it doesn't matter because there's nothing obstructing your path. There's probably a few places where you can break line of sight or whatever, but you kind of just can do whatever. And when you're working within that much more claustrophobic space, you as a player have to be much more conscious of what you are doing and how you are maneuvering yourself. Because just like one minor error in that can results in punishment coming much faster. And it means, and I say this a lot, but the context in which you place your gameplay elements is a big part to play in how people perceive them. Because an imp in a big open arena is nothing. It's you sneeze and he dies. But if you put that imp in a room where you barely have enough space to maneuver, it's like a much more harrowing experience. And obviously that's something we use a lot in Viscerafest. Because I mean, like I wouldn't say most of the enemies are difficult to deal with in Viscerafest, but I'd say that a lot of like what kind of instigates some of the challenges, just how they're used. I'm debating whether or not I want to go on this rant. I
can take the reins for a bit if you want. I would say that in my experience of the first episode of Viscerafest, it's not, no one enemy is difficult to deal with. It's much like a very expertly crafted, like almost slaughter map in Doom. It's the combination and the setting that really sets it up and makes it difficult. So for instance, I forget which level it is, but there's this one room where you have this blocked off part where you can see extra enemies behind these force fields, and you also have a downstairs area, and you have a bunch of enemies that are on the upstairs area. If you jump to the downstairs area, you're introduced now to another set of enemies, and they're not exactly oh no, not those enemies. It's more like, oh, the enemies that are upstairs are still raining hellfire on me. I shouldn't have made this choice. Now I got to go back up the ladder and deal with it. And you constantly throughout the game kind of cycle the player through those sorts of difficult choices, as you said, because of the way that you set up these sort of claustrophobic environments. And I think that's like pretty much the game in a nutshell so far, at least. Yeah. You're very good at that.
Yeah. The what I was going to say was a lot of how people perceive an enemy is entirely based off of the context they're used in. I don't think people would hate Archviles as much as they do if when you're fighting an Archvile, there's like maybe 2 imps and a pinky running around, and you always have a massive pillar you can hide behind to easily break line of sight. Like at that point, I think people would probably view Archviles as kind of a joke, because it's like, oh, well, it's like, yeah, they can resurrect enemies, and they have like this line of sight hits can attack, but who cares? Like, they're easy. It's easy. You can break line of sight with them. There's, they usually, like, there's just a few enemies running around. It's no big deal.
No,
and
it's
then,
when
like,
Major Arlene throws 30 of them at you at a
Yeah.
time. Like, that's when that's why people hate Archviles.
yeah, no, well, I mean, I don't like slaughter maps. I hate slaughter maps.
I don't hate them, but they're not
Yeah.
my thing. You know what I
For
mean?
me, for me, one of the reason why I don't like slaughter maps is because they usually devolve into being a very mindless slog. What I like is the Quake philosophy, and it's one of the reasons why I very heavily prefer Quake to Doom. Is that in Quake you have significantly smaller groups of enemies to deal with. But each individual enemy is much more of a threat because they're both tankier and more aggressive than any of the enemies were in Doom. And as a result, you have to be effectively. It makes the experience significantly less mindless because you can track what's going on. It's like, yes, there's less enemies, but they're all significantly more dangerous than 500 imps are going to be, or whatever,
Yeah.
And as a result, it's like, I got to be much more conscious. It's like, basically, your moment-to-moment decisions matter much more than I feel like they do on a slaughter map where it's just like, let's circle strafe and
In Doom,
use my super shotgun on imps.
the enemies are very slow in their attacks.
Yes.
Their projectiles are also very slow. So it's much more like about you being graceful with the timing. Whereas in Quake, I agree with you. It's like, now that motherfucker's coming. Like,
Speaking of Quake, actually, I'll shill from my butt here. There's a wonderful guy on our Discord named Flesh Workshop, I think, and he made me this beautiful shambler that you guys can get.
You'll have to give me a picture because this one's going to be probably audio only, but I'll make sure.
Oh yeah,
mix it in.
I'm showing it to the camera that you guys can't see.
So is that a furry shambler? Or
It is indeed a fuzzy shambler. I'll take him
Okay.
off his stand. But yeah, he's a fuzzy boy. But there is a bald variant as well. You guys can get, if you guys don't like fuzzy variants, there is a bald variant of the shambler as well. I told them to make that. But yeah, no. Anyways, but that's kind of like a big philosophy that I had going into Viscerafest was I wanted to make sure it's like every enemy placement feels like it matters in an encounter. It's like you don't have just like anything extraneous. It's like everything has to put pressure on the player. Like basically, in my opinion, the best designed combat encounters are like elaborately designed death traps, where it's like, so for that fight, for example, that you're talking about, so we have like grenadiers on these railings around you. And one of the great things about the grenadiers is that they greatly they greatly impact your positioning, because if you get hit by one of those grenades, you get kicked. So it forces you to be really conscious of, where are those grenades going to be? And so it's like in that arena, we basically have a bunch of pressure enemies positioned on this upper railing area in order to try and kind of force you, but encourage you so you don't die, to go into the gutters. But when you go into the gutters, you've got the grenadiers now raining down on you, where you have significantly less room to avoid them. And again, you have to be significantly more conscious of your positioning. So a lot of that fight is one, taking out the grenadiers so that whilst you're stuck in the gutters, oh dear, when you're stuck in the gutters, you don't have them raining down on you. And basically what we want you to do in Viscerafest is we want you to think about every action you take. We want every decision you make to effectively have some impact on the fight, whether it's a good decision or a bad decision. Basically, and this has been said to death, but I think maybe it's more so true of Viscerafest and other similar games, is that it's like a fast-paced game of speed chess, where like you got to use the right weapon on the right thing at the right time, and you basically need to be able to walk into a room, size up what the hell is going on, and figure out the most efficient path to break through it. And for me, that was a lot of like kind of the core design we were shooting for, was to make like a really fast-paced strategy game. In essence, it's why ammo is so limited. It's why it's why I would say on the whole we punish poor decision making much more so than similar games. In some people's opinions, maybe more so than we should. But
I mean, like even on the easiest difficulty setting, like ammo is still like holy shit, man!
I mean, it's funny actually. I didn't know how hard the game was. I had only really figured out that the game was going to be as hard as people, because like my original plan is, I'll start out pretty easy, and then I'll kind of work up to like Blood's level of difficulty by the end of the game. And then people were telling me, "Oh, this is already harder than Blood," and I was like, "What?"
It's like, I mean, I could go ad nauseum on this, but it's like, well, who play tested the game? Oh, like me. Oh, yeah. But you made the game, and B, like you're an expert first-person shooter player, and like the easy difficulty is supposed to be for people who, I like how BioShock did it, where it's like, you know, the difficulty setters are literally like, you know, I'm new to shooters, I've played a lot of shooters, I'm really good at shooters, like, you know what I mean? Like it spells it out really easily for them, and like I think people forget that because they kind of assume that the only people who are going to play my game are people who are interested in this sort of game. In your case, especially, it's like you've kind of transcended the boomer shooter thing, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. You know, like the retro first person shooter zeitgeist genre, whatever the fuck we want to go with here. Mm. You've successfully marketed yourself to where people who ordinarily wouldn't be part of that are like, hey, I resonate with this character. I want to play this game. I want to try this out. I want to try something new. And that's good. That's like 101 marketing. You kicked ass. Like, good.
Yeah, no. Well, and we do something similar with our difficulty settings, to where, you know, it's like you'll kind of have a descriptor next to it, and it's actually one of the reasons why I think the difficulty set are like medium, hard, brutal, extreme, and then nightmare now, because I think it used to be easy, medium, hard, brutal, and then nightmare. But people came back to us and they were like, "This is really hard." But like we kind of, almost to an obnoxious extent now, we have like tons of warnings before you play the game when you're in the difficulty settings menu. It's like, hey, when you hover over the difficulties, here's like a vague description of what the difficulties are going to be like, and when you click on the difficulty, there's a warning to give you like a very specific description of what changes and how hard it's going to be. And I think the description for like the easiest difficulty is like, it's still hard, but it's not as hard as everything else. So it's something like that. But yeah, no, it's I think the best way I can put it is I would say a lot of other similar games have similar things to Viscerafest, mechanically speaking, but a lot of those games don't force you to the same extent to take advantage of the abilities you're given. You have a lot more freedom in terms of like, oh, I can kind of just use the dash whenever I feel like it, or whatever, outside of maybe Ultra Kill, because I hate Gabriel. But no, yeah, no, like you're effectively really forced to take advantage to the best of your ability the tools that you have on hand, and you're incredibly powerful when you do, but I think a lot of people just aren't used to having to take advantage of those things to the extent that we ask of them. And as a result, the game is very difficult for a lot of people, because it's like, hey, yeah, there's bunny hopping, but like most people don't bunny hop. Like, especially not in Quake, but like even in Dusk, there's a lot of people who don't bunny hop. and bunny hopping and dusk breaks the game. But it's a lot of people are starting used to doing that stuff, and so it's like when this stuff becomes basically mandatory to survive, it's like, and then that's kind of coupled with the fact I say that the game's pretty punishing if you can't. We don't have you can't save scum, which is something that makes everybody so happy, and I hear about on a daily basis. But effectively, a lot of the reason why we have the save system that we do is because I personally, internally, we're not big fans of quick saving systems because, in our opinion, if you, the player, are going to fail to do something, then you should be punished. Because, like, if there's no punishment for failure, then why does failure exist, basically, I would say is our philosophy. It's like, if I fail to do something that the game wants me to do, and the game effectively gives me no recourse for my actions, then that fail state might as well not be there at all. Like Proteus has this issue, I'd say, where it's like, hey, you have this checkpoint, and you go back to this checkpoint, but everything you've done is already done. So it's like, really, you're not dying. You're just kind of, being thrown back a few steps. And quick saving kind of has that same issue where it's like, oh, I can just keep hitting F6 over and over and over again, and I can completely basically cheese my way through this experience. And with how much we want to hammer in the players, like learn the mechanics and get better at the game, having a system that would effectively allow them to bypass all that by constantly save scumming would not be ideal, which is why we have the limited save system. Obviously, it doesn't make everybody happy, but it's not really meant to make people happy. It's just there to let people save their progress and to also act as a means to soften the blow of dying so you don't have to pistol start every level note or something.
Yeah.
But
it's one of those very contentious things that just kind of like occurs over and over again, where it's like, okay, what's the solution to your saving? Is it, do you take the Mario method where it's like you get 3 lives and fuck you if or do you take a almost Dark Souls approach and just like really make it something you have to work for? Like saving is a mechanic in the game that you actually have to earn the ability to do. And it could go a lot of different ways. I think Elderborn hit the nail on the head. Like they almost copied the Dark Souls system, but made it work for like a first person sort of like action based game that's a little less punishing, I would say, just in general.
Mm-hmm.
But then the traditional, like if you go back and play Dark Souls 1 or something like that. But I don't know. There's so many different ways to tackle that problem. Yours is fine. It works for me. I mean, I'm the shittiest FPS player probably in the whole world, and I pulled it off. I'm doing okay.
We kind of try to treat the placement of them like checkpoints so that it doesn't get irritating.
Yeah.
I'd say maybe the reason why some people do feel irritated is because they don't realize they're placed like that with that in mind, so they kind of hoard them. By the way, while we're on saving, let's, I'd say this is probably another thing relevant to development within the last year, maybe, is we've added, is saving. For those of you who don't know, who aren't familiar with game development, saving is hell. And it is probably one of the most terrifying and evil things any game developer could work on. Because if you want bugs, oh boy, there you go. There's like a free bug generator. Is make a save system. Because, oh my gosh. Because basically the way saving works in games is that as a developer, we have to tell individually the game what has to be remembered every time the game saves, right? So we have to, catalog how much ammo does the player have for this weapon, or this weapon, or this weapon, or this weapon. What is the player's exact coordinates in the situation? What are all of the enemies' exact coordinates in the situation? What are the enemies doing when you save? What doors are open? What doors are closed? What buttons has the player pressed? What buttons has the player not pressed? is there a scripted sequence? Well, guess what? You're in for an extra layer of hell because we have to remember exactly where in the sequence you were and all the timers and all this stuff that's specifically set up to work like this. And it's just, oh my god, like 90% of probably the bugs we've had with Viscerafest have all been related to saving. And my favorite one, which just came back recently that we had to deal with, is that if your operating system is not using English as its base language, then there are characters within the scripting that are used, like when you save like coordinates and stuff, that aren't remembered. So it's like the what we would usually use is like decimal points for stuff like coordinates and whatnot. None of that's remembered. So that number basically just turns into like one overbloated value of like 500.7089 or just like something massively stupid, and all of the doors will like fly to their different like alien coordinates because of that. It's just, oh my god. I don't think it's just everything is pain. Saving is pain. I mean, like I remember I asked David Szymanski, like, hey, was working on the save system for Dusk Hell, and he was like, yes. Which is probably the reason why most games nowadays use like a checkpoint system, just because it's like the amount of data you have to remember when there are specific points where the player that are like saved is significantly less, because it's like, oh, I can just assume the player has like done this by now, and as a result, I don't even really need to save that. I can just like kind of put the thing in and make sure that when the player gets back to the save, all this stuff is already done or whatever. And as a result, things are significantly less likely to break. Whereas for us, because there are so many variables in what the player can be doing and where they can save and whatnot, we have to remember everything, and everything hates that. Which is also one of the reasons why if you go into the option settings and change the difficulty, you basically have to reset the level, because with stuff that changes between each difficulty setting, and just it all hurts. Making games is hard.
Now imagine doing that for like an RTS game, where like an enemy is like, their ship is sailing towards you, and like, oh, but then you reload and it's like, oh, wow, they're not here anymore.
Yeah. Oh god,
fucked them up.
I can't even remember. Do RTS games use quick save systems? It's been so long since I played like Rise of Nations.
Shit. The one that I've been like on a kick with recently is like Frozenheim, which is a Hyper Strange game, and I love it. It's still in early access, kind of. There's a lot of jank to it. That's okay. I accept that. But yeah, there's a lot of those moments where it's like you push the, I'm saving the current state I'm in kind of situations. Or like, all right, I saved it. Now my civilization, same thing, no problems. But whatever was going on with the enemies, that's up in the air.
Yeah, no, oh my gosh. But yeah, we've kind of gone on a tangent. I don't know.
It's okay.
Maybe there's something else you want to focus on. And all right, but yeah, so this has been an unfocused mishmash of rants. So maybe to kind of get more back on focus. So basically, following the release into early access, I kind of did a reevaluation of our situation, because by this point, I was working full time on the game, and so was Elijah. I no longer had to work my day job, but scheduling for our milestones and stuff was super tight. And as a result, we were kind of bouncing all over the place, just constantly like in a panic to get things done with how tight everything was. And I got back to our publisher and I was like, hey, look, I had basically, when we were making the milestones, I actually let them know. I was like, I don't know that we're going to be able to keep up with this, because I don't know how long any of this stuff is going to take, but this seems a little bit tight to me. And I kind of came back after all this time later. I was like, yeah, look, we're not going to be able to keep up with these milestones, and I want to give all the credit to 1C because they are they've the amount of support they've given us and how supportive they've been and how much of a not dickish publisher they've been has been wonderful. And they were basically like, yeah, I mean, we understand. Let's reevaluate the scheduling. You kind of give us what you think works. We'll go over it and we'll talk about it. And we'll go from there. So we completely redid our milestone schedule, shifted things around a fair bit, and so now we're working on a much better schedule, a significantly less tighter one, and we have a much more freeing pace we can move at, which has been another thing that's been incredibly relieving. I'd say. I'm trying to think of any other major developments that have happened because it's just like everything that's happened since we released into early access has been such a blur. Our community's just I think we're at like 3,500 people now, maybe going on 4,000. I just recently hit 6,000 followers on Twitter, and that was crazy. It's been incredibly strange being in this position, and I don't think it will ever fully settle in. Kind of the extent to which we've grown, because I definitely talked about this last time, but I started working on this game when I was 12 years old, and I'm 21 now, so it's been a little while. And,
how was that first beer?
Huh?
How was your first beer?
Oh, I don't drink. I've never drunken. I've taken like a sip, but I don't like beer. I have no desire to drink. But I'm 21 now, so it's been 9 years going on. And oh my gosh, like it's very strange to have like come all this way, having done all this, and to actually finally be in this position where it's like I have like people genuinely following me who care about what I'm doing, and to have a nice little community that we've sort of built up over the course of time. Things have calmed down within our community, thank friggin' God, because I don't know that I would have been able to handle the Discord if it was that crazy as it was when we were initially released the demo. Because again, like we had easily like 100, maybe 100 people pouring in a day, which, that was pain. I just trucking along with Chapter 2 stuff now, like I said. We've, since, I think in the wake of what happened with Wrath, 1C has been wanting to maybe touch bases with kind of everyone that's working under them a bit more. So we've started some bi-weekly meetings, just kind of keeping them updated so that way they're a bit more in the loop of what's actually going on, because throughout everything, they've been incredibly hands-off with us. Like, I think it's kind of shocked me how hands-off they've been, because it's like, I mentioned during our interview with them, they were basically like, yeah, we want to publish Viscerafest. We didn't tell them anything. Like, they kind of knew nothing about Viscerafest going into it, other than what was in the trailer or what they played in the demo, which I'm going to say right now is not at all representative of where Viscerafest is going to end up by the end of the game. I would say they had a very skewed perspective on what the game was and what it was meant to be, and as a result, it's just kind of shocked me, because it's like I'm used to hearing like so many horror stories about like developers working with publishers, and there's always like, oh, the publisher wants them to change this or that, whereas it's like I feel like we can kind of do whatever we want at this point under 1C, which is like incredibly relieving, because I would say, like, obviously one of the bigger fears I had going into working with a publisher was how much creative freedom are we actually going to have? Are they going to try to change things and whatnot? And it was actually one of the reasons why I wasn't potentially interested in like pursuing working with New Blood, because it's like I feel like New Blood as a company, nothing against them, but they tend to be very collaborative in their projects to the point where it's like very clear, like everybody who's working on it is like rubbing off on the project to an extent where it's like I don't know how much of that was like, say, what David Szymanski or Hakata intended. And to an extent, that's good because, like, when you have more eyes and more creative fingers on a game, you're much more likely to catch problems, whether it be in design or in, bugs or whatever it happens to be. But I guess my fear with working on that is it's like at some point, like the vision for what I wanted to do would end up shifting around because it's not. Viscerafest is not a very accessible game in terms of both its difficulty and I would say it's like some of the stuff we do narratively is a bit weird. And I think my fear going into working with anybody would be they'd look at that and go, oh, that's not quite as marketable as what Viscerafest looks like from the outset, sort of what we've been presenting so far. Let's maybe change that up a bit.
Yeah, they're very different, just brands in general. Like New Blood's whole brand sort of relies on like this is a New Blood game. Like what you're going to get from it. Even in games that are so it's different as like Ultra Kill and Faith, or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that was one of my big fears. Was it's like I don't want it to become like a New Blood game or a Devolver Digital game or something like that. Where
even Devolver is pretty. I mean, there is the this is a Devolver Digital game, but there's also like they publish so many indies that it's just like that you have a very wide array of what they turn out. But in a case like, I mean, just look through 1C's catalog. Recently, they've kind of caught on to this sort of like retro shooter wave, where they picked up. They're working with 3D Realms on Wrath and Graven, and then they have you and. But prior to that, even you go all the way back to like 2007, I want to say, with their catalog, and it's just like here's a bunch of very different kind of stuff with some very strong leaning towards like the like King's Bounty or Ancestors Legacy, like that sort of theme, with the medieval battlegrounds, whatever the fuck. But
a lot
ultimately,
of real-time strategy stuff.
Yeah, a lot of respect to the developer to like make whatever kind of fucking game you want, and we're just going to finance it and help you market it. Like that makes sense.
And I'm not saying like that was something Devolver does. I'm just saying like that would be like one of my fears with going into a publisher was like that effectively this would become more known as like the publisher's game as opposed to my game. I mean, obviously we're always open to feedback and thoughts from other people. But my fear would be that, again, through the course of working with someone like that, you'll potentially run the risk of, like, whatever your intentions or desires for the game are, they just get lost in translation because, not everybody's going to like or agree with what you're doing. And if those are the people who you have over you, then that becomes a problem. But working with 1C has been pretty pain-free for the most part. Probably the most painful thing we had to go through was the bank crap, which wasn't even 1C's fault. That was pain. But I really can't complain about the position I'm in. I've been incredibly blessed throughout development. I could have never dreamed of being in the position I am today and being able and like having the following we do. And I imagine it's probably only going to grow, especially as we move out of early access and more stuff gets done, it's both scary and exciting, especially because now that we're actually getting into the stuff that I would say like is Viscerafest in regards to chapters 2 and 3. It's like the stuff that has been in my head for so long is finally going to be something that other people can see, and it's kind of scary because I don't know how people are going to take it. I'd imagine they're going to take it pretty well because they took what we did at the end of chapter 1 pretty well with that with C1L6 Wayward Watchers, which we might want to come back around to that. I don't know. I'm not sure how much more I can say without tapping into spoilers.
It's up to you, but I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to like encourage you to put yourself in a bad position.
Yeah, it's I think the best way I can put it is Viscerafest on the whole, I would say presents itself from the outset as being a very, very build engine like game, where it's like, oh, here's your goofy one-liner spitting protagonist, and it's like the intro to the game is intentionally like almost a misdirect in terms of the tone. And it's like as the game progresses, it slowly kind of descends into a much more serious and dark tone as it progresses. Like even within Carolyn, with what we're doing, it's like as she realizes more of what's going on, it's like her attitude starts to change. I think there's a point in the game where we cut out the one-liners entirely, which I don't know how people are going to take that, but it's like the intent is like it's like you hit a point where Carolyn kind of goes like, okay, what's going on? Like
It's time to get serious.
yeah. And in order to tonally match that shift, we kind of wanted like there to be a distinct contrast, but like a clear before and after point. And the level we're working on right now is kind of where that shift, I would say, really starts to take place. Like in chapter 2, the sort of impact of like Wayward Watchers and stuff is still kind of lingering.
Mm-hmm.
That like almost intentionally jarring tonal shift is still kind of has like its remnants on the game, and it's starting to like creep in more and more. Like I said, as we introduce like stuff like Deep Ones and the cults that are going on Earth, or that are present on Earth, and you get a much greater sense because it's like, oh, they're starting to meddle in with what the USC is doing, and it becomes very clear, I would say. I mean, there's a somewhat generic line in chapter 1 where Dr. Marquise basically talks about how it's like you have no idea what's going on here, and I'd say chapter 2 very early on pretty quickly establishes just how much more you don't know, which is fun because that much more. Both mechanically and in terms of the narrative, it's both intriguing and I'd say it brings a lot of the flavor into Viscerafest that I feel would be missing if it were just like a generic build engine game, or I mean it's not a build engine game, but like that kind of game where it's like, hey, it's just a fast-paced, goofy running gun shooter with protagonist who wants to propose to her boyfriend.
There's a thing with you that I noticed from the very first time I ever spoke to you. Is like you have this extremely vast idea of what your game would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like there's so many ideas going on. There's so like it's too fucking much. Like most sensible publishers would be like, narrow it the fuck down, kid. Like,
I almost feel I should have narrowed it down is what I should have done, just because because I mean, like, and we talked about this last time, but like I said, the game's been in development since 2012, and a lot has changed since then. But a lot of like why Viscerafest has taken as long as it has is because there is just so much to it that for a first project, it's a terrible first project. It is not the kind of game you want to start out making because, as I tell so many people who ask me, like, I'm getting into game development, what should I do? I always say start small. Don't do what I did. Because you're going to be at this for years and years and years, and you're not going to have anything to show for it until, like, 20 years down the road when, like, your game finally comes out.
But what's beautiful about you in general and also about this project is that you are so committed to it. You're so invested in not just the game itself, but also like the character.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things, and you can just shut me the fuck up if this is too far, but like the way you reacted to the key art of Carolyn in the Realms Deep Discord was like a very clear example of this. And everybody kind of universally was like, it's his fucking property. Like, I'm not mad at him, but like, I mean, to me, it was just like, oh yeah, she looks great. Fuck yeah. It looks, I told Babito is the guy who did the key art for Realms Deep, and he was amazing, but
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from. Like, this is like, you feel so strongly about the way that this character is portrayed. Like, she has to be exactly like the right mix of like, okay, she's kind of fucked up, but she's also kind of beautiful. And it's like, you can't mess around with the recipe, like you can't go into a restaurant and just start messing with the secret sauce. Like,
yeah. Well, specifically in that instance, kind of what happened, I felt, was that Carolyn is a very difficult character to draw. Like shockingly so, I would almost say. Like, on the surface, it feels simple, but when you actually go in, it's like trying to find the right balance of features and everything is a pain. And a lot of, I think the problem is that, like, there's a misunderstanding of like what the creative intentions of the design are to some extent, because it's like the overall kind of idea for how she looks is that she's meant to strike a nice balance between occupying the uncanny valley and being creepy and weird, but like also being like just human and feminine enough that it's like there's still like somewhat of this this level of visual appeal. She's not like hideously ugly, and I'd say like one of the issues I see a lot of like artists who like to, and I love fan art and stuff. Like, I'm not knocking them, especially because like like the art people do is amazing. But like it comes down to, for me, it's like when I am having something that I am presenting as being representative of what my game is, I want that thing to match what my creative intentions for the game are. Mm-hmm. And the issue I was having with the key art that was done for Realms Deep, as amazing as that artist guy is I felt like it was leaning way too heavily on sort of like the more haggish, uncanny valley elements than it was on the more humanistic elements. And even then, I wasn't super happy with how it came out because we were really crunching on time. Like, when we redid that art, it was like the day before, like basically we had a day to fix it, was what Fred gave us. And let me tell you, if you thought, if I've showed like some before and afters of the key art internally, and it's like, if you thought that was bad, you should have seen some of the ones he came back to me with, because like when we were doing the editing, it kind of got worse and worse, and I was like, oh no, we're not going to be able to fix this in time.
Yeah, I mean that's any time you're on a real deadline. It's like, we have to go live at 7:00 on this day. And I mean, I'll probably end up doing like a post-mortem sort of podcast on it with Jahar at some point, but fuck, man, and I felt for every single developer involved. I was like, because I'm telling them straight up, like, we are going live with this, and if you send me the wrong fucking thing, or and mistakes will be made.
Yeah,
like that's what's going to be shown, and it's so difficult to like put someone in that position. I mean, there's a point where I was ready to fucking cry. Like, my wife and Alex Pixie and like the guys were like, like because I'm really not okay with giving people bad news. It's like not my favorite thing. I'm okay. I can do it, but I just want to like make everyone happy. Like I care about every single person that I'm in contact with. That I make, if I'm reaching out to you and making promises to you, I intend to keep them. And if I can't, do it, it's a difficult position to be in, man. Like, but with the key art in particular, it's like, first of all we ever see of Carolyn, canonically is like this sort of like visual novel-esque artwork that you guys do for the game. And then this is like portraying. Now we're portraying her in this like, almost like, what like 3D, not quite 3D, but you know what I'm saying, like lit sort of area. And it's like, and amongst other characters that are drawn differently than they are. Ultimately, I think it's a win. Like you got your character standing next to like Turok guy and Postal dude. Like, I mean, I would probably just be like, you know what? Fuck it. Do whatever you want. But I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. The, geez, I'm thinking. I think one of the big issues is that with Carolyn's design being kind of as weird as it is, not only is it like difficult to draw in general, but it's difficult to translate into different art styles because various things have to account. You have to change various elements to account for the shifts in art style while still keeping the original creative intentions in mind. And I think that was one of the biggest things that was kind of a struggle with redoing that art. It's like, what is the balance of features? What are we going to do? Because we basically have to completely redesign her to fit within this art style. But yeah, no, I mean, like, and going back to like time crunching stuff, I mean, and obviously I've mentioned that we in particular have had to do some running to the finish line at times, but I think crunch in general in the industry, rightfully so, has a very, very negative perception, mostly because, and I think I'd say the biggest issue when it comes to crunch is always like, I would say like forced crunch, where it's like a lot of AAA studios suffer from the fact that there's almost always like some abuse and poor management at the higher level that effectively very harshly impacts a game's development and turns it into a waking nightmare. But like to an extent, any kind of software development is always going to have sort of that vibe to it where it's like there's always going to be some rushing to the finish line and there's always going to be some level of crunch. Like, I find it genuinely hard to believe when a developer will come out and go, oh, like, we don't crunch on our game. And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I find that hard to buy because it's like one of the issues with software development is you have no idea what's going to happen. Like, something you think could be easy could be a waking nightmare, and something you think could be a waking nightmare might be very, very easy. And the problem is it's like almost impossible to plan around that crap. Like, it is, unless you like give yourself the most vastly generous schedule in the world, especially if you're working under a publisher, you're not going to have the freedom to do that. And as a result, it's just like, at some point, the hammer's going to have to come down and you're going to have to work your butt off.
There's a huge difference between, like, when someone tells you you have to pull a 16-hour day and when you decide, I want to pull a 16-hour day because I want to get this done. Mm-hmm. Totally different psychological processes going on, you know?
Yes.
I get that.
It is. Yeah, game development is hard, and a lot of that difficulty comes from the fact that, again, there are so many variables present in the act of developing a game that effectively will dictate when and how something gets done. And the problem is that, you know, as human beings, we want everything to be done on our time, and software doesn't like to work like that. I feel like personally for me, kind of the perspective I have about crunch is that it's fine in moderation because it kind of has to be done. It is a necessary evil, really. As much as I would prefer it not have to happen, there is an extent where it's like it's almost impossible to avoid. Because again, things will take longer than you want it to. Some things will happen much faster than you want them to. And with that being impossible to plan around, it often, like, we've had an update that we were supposed to push 3 weeks ago, and it's not come out yet because things keep going wrong. Because we
keep doing all these interviews, man. You should be
no,
working right now.
no, we've been working on controller support, and that's been pain. But things keep breaking. And it's like, your options are release the finish on Buggy Mess or delay it. And work like hell to make sure that it comes out as soon as possible. It's, but like, I'd say, crunch as a necessity is always better than, like, kind of what you said, like, forced crunch, where it's like, the thing I hate is, like, under a lot of, and this is another fear I had, is under a lot of publishers, you run into just this kind of like, they cultivate this atmosphere of like, you don't have to do the extra hours, you don't have to crunch, but we're basically going to indirectly threaten you with your job if you don't do it. And I mean, it's there's definitely been a fair amount of long nights, let's call them, working on Viscerafest. I remember the demo, when we released the demo, actually, I probably, right the day before we released it, I think we were working from 9 p.m. at night to like 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. And then we went to bed for like 3 to 4 hours, came back, and we worked until we released it. Which was later that day. Just because it's like, again, like with that demo, things kept going wrong. Like we had planned it to release it like 2 or 3 months prior to having actually released it. Because like things kept breaking, things kept going wrong, things kept taking longer than we expected them to. But yeah. I love going on rants where I have like no end point to make. they're the most wonderful.
Ultimately, it's I get what you're getting at here, and it's just like, look, shit goes wrong. That's part of it, and the Keep has very much stepped into the realm of like dealing with, okay, let's make games now, and when the grits hit the pan. All right, well, we just got to make a decision. And my decision thus far has always been like, I would still rather us wait and do the right thing than to disappoint people with an inferior product, which is to me, it's a very simple decision because it's like you watch every AAA developer make the same mistake over and over again. And it's hard to even blame it on any body there because they're part of an organism that is functioning, as if they are a cell that can be dismissed at any point. Mm-hmm. And you start to see these situations where every single fucking game that gets released is incomplete when it comes out because they're like, well, we got to deliver on time because that's what the investors want. Mm-hmm. And then you get crap. And then the status quo now is wait 6 months before you play any game that you bought. Yeah. And that's horrific. I'd rather you just like never promise me a date at all and then deliver me a product when you can. And I'll be like, oh man, this is perfect right out of the box. And I get to play them because then I don't have to go through the whole process. It's like getting, gotta be smart. We're monetized on YouTube now. Hold on. I'm gonna come up with a not disgusting metaphor. It's like when you're on a date, a very consensual and polite date with a lady, and you're like, "Hello, ma'am. Would you like to make love? Maybe next week." Don't even put it on the table until you're ready. is what some people would say. It's like,
Yeah.
because that's a horrible metaphor. God help me.
Oh dear.
I guess the next thing, because we're like an hour and a half in now, and I feel like I've given you enough time to rant and rave about development. I want to get into some of the more human parts of the game. One of the things you said earlier was, and actually funny, I just said human parts of the game because it's the exact opposite. It's talking about the Lovecraft elements and especially the deep ones and all that stuff. And you talked about how you don't want this to be a world fully inhabited and dominated by humans. My pushback to that, and I think one of the best examples of this is in Star Trek: The Next Generation. Man, there's probably like a counter, like Civvy Sewer counter. That's got to be like a motherlode Star Trek counter. They address this issue of like, why are humans always the forefront of everything? And obviously in Star Trek, it's because they're the cheapest people to make because you don't have to put makeup on them. Okay, we get that. But the canonical reasoning is being like, what makes us special? What makes us a race that would prosper at all in a multi planetary environment or whatever? And what they came down to is that human beings are uniquely tenacious. Like we are, regardless of whether or not, like Vulcans are logical, like that's their thing. They're really efficient and logical and they always make their most pragmatic choice. Or Klingons are always going to win with dominance. They're going to win with violence. They're going to, that's their thing. Okay. That's what makes them strong. What makes humans strong is that we will plug away when the odds are against us. So, like, for no fucking apparent reason. Like there's no logical or like, even if you do the odds of like, how would it come out if we just fought with brute force? We'll never get there. It's like a mental brute force. And ultimately that is why we end up in the Star Trek universe, at least, being sort of, not necessarily the ultimate like leaders of the universe, because obviously they cooperate and integrate with the other planetary races, but they end up in this situation where they're like, okay, well, there's an overwhelming amount of humans still here. In the center of the whole unified interplanetary government ends up being on Earth, because they're like, these motherfuckers get shit done. That's what they do. So when you're talking about that philosophy in your game of like, I don't think humans should be the most dominant species. I'm not trying to push back against it. Like I think that's a super interesting thing, and a very Lovecraftian thing is like, we're small, we're insignificant. But I do want to know where that comes from. Like, how did you arrive at that logic?
How did I come to that? Oh boy, that's one of the big issues with tackling the development of like Viscerafest story is that it's like, I can't like go, oh, I took inspiration from this, or oh, I took inspiration from that, because it's like almost everything is like more so of like an accumulative process, where it's like, I'm sure things have like subtly and unconsciously inspired me, but there's never like I can draw a clear line to, oh, that thing, like this is that thing. In terms of kind of how I would say I arrived at that perspective, I'd say it probably mostly kind of comes from sort of that Lovecraftian angle, like a lot of kind of what H.P. Lovecraft in his mythos, I would say, like, if I had to sum up like what the Lovecraft mythos is all about, it's all about like fear of like the unknown and what you don't understand, and like how small we all are in that. And to me, it's like the idea that it's like, oh, we're so insignificant that like we're practically just short of like ceasing to exist. And the universe is just going to go on without us. Like that's both a scary idea, but like from like a narrative and like sci-fi perspective, I'd say it's also a very interesting, compelling one. It's like how are things going to function like when humanity isn't at the forefront of everything. There's a limited extent to which we can pursue that, because one of the things with Viscerafest is that it has a lot of lore, like way too much lore, and not all of it is going to be stuff that is directly addressed within the game because of how much lore there is. We do have a library, which is basically like there's going to be a chunk of the hub where you can go and like as you progress through the game, you'll unlock some new stuff there that you can read about and kind of learn deeper about the universe as a whole. But like even then, like we can't include everything because there's just so much. But I would say that's probably kind of the main area where is more so like taking the Lovecraftian perspective on it. And I would say, whilst we are very, very heavily entrenched and inspired by Lovecraft for some of the narrative elements, directly pulling from the mythos a lot of the times, and mostly just tweaking things here and there because there's not really a canon to the mythos. Or I should say there's various canons to the mythos. I would say kind of the way we treat it is like there's a layer of respect to it that we want to pay service to. Like, we don't want to have a moment where you come out and you kill Cthulhu or something like that. Because, I don't feel like that kind of lines up with, and Cthulhu can die within the mythos, I guess, but it doesn't really kind of match the tone and vibe that the mythos strives for. But I would say we want to pay respect to it, whilst also not still also doing our own thing. I would say we use the mythos as more of a canvas to paint on rather than a set of rules to abide by. But at the same time, it's we still want that canvas to be recognizable as that canvas and not, I don't know, this freaking anime where all of the gods are anime schoolgirls or something stupid like that, which is just the weirdest thing to me. I don't know why that's a thing, but
shout out to Fida Pudi Samurai.
Oh no. But yeah, pretty much everything we do narratively, it's I would say this is more so a perspective I've developed in recent times, but where it's I've tried to kind of focus things more into a single idea as opposed to being just completely disparate elements, which is what I feel early on a lot of the narrative was. It was just a bunch of frozen. It was a bunch of different elements that were kind of just coinciding with one another, as opposed to coming to a more singular direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel in the process of doing that, things become too chaotic, too impossible to track, and you start focusing narratively more on those individual elements. You see, I'd say this is a issue with writing in more recent years, where it's narrative becomes less focused on character and more just focused on the things that are happening. I would almost say, to an extent, Doom Eternal suffers from this a little bit. As much as I love that game, narratively speaking, it's just everything is happening and there's a lore explanation for everything, and you're not going to be able to track what's going on because it's here's the 5-hour long lore expose on why this is a thing and why this character is here, when it doesn't contribute to anything, when it doesn't have any value within the narrative or the story. And with Viscerafest, like I said, in more recent times, and in tandem with us bringing the diving more so into Carolyn and what's going on with her, just trying to create something that's again more focused in terms of the overall direction we're going for. almost as focused as the gameplay, I would hope. But yeah.
It was one of the things I got into when I was talking to the guys from White Hell. Is the kind of, though you two sort of share a genre, right? Like it's a first-person shooter, it's retro. Okay, all right, that's about it. And I love their game and I love your game, both in very different ways. But the key difference being like that, yeah, they do have a protagonist, like it's Yarmo.
Mm-hmm.
If you didn't read the Steam page or whatever, you probably wouldn't even know the guy's name is Yarmo.
I didn't know he had a name.
Yeah, he doesn't speak. He just like kicks ass and he drinks beer, and we get that. And he shoots people because that are bad, because they're fascists, and fuck them. That, to put it exactly, almost in Miko's words, yeah, like that's it. And the fundamental difference is like your game really, really hinges on, okay, Caroline is a person. You are inhabiting the skin of this character, as opposed to like a Gordon Freeman sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like it's a totally different vibe. And seeing the two kind of do their own thing in tandem is interesting to me, because I get to witness like the marketing part of it. And in your case, I think people who are, as I said, I think I said this like an hour ago or whatever, but like who are not interested whatsoever in playing a boomer shooter will attach themselves to the artwork and the style and the character that you've created and go all in with it. It's some similar thing with Stellar Valkyrie. What we're doing is like, not that we intend in any way to lack on gameplay, but it's just like, the selling point of this game is that we want you to be attached to Falco. He is a character who's supposed to be why you're here. Like, you are to inhabit the skin of Falco Crimson, or in your case, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Did you intend for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of the perspective I would say I have when it comes to like characters in games is there's like, I want to say like 3 or 4 different like kinds of characters that can be in games. You have like, and there are stronger and weak, and within those like 3 or 4 variants, there's like stronger and weaker, or more or less compelling ways to do it. One of the most common ones I would say is like you have like the silent protagonist who they're technically meant to be a pre-established character and who you are just inhabiting the body of, but there is nothing about them that is conveyed to the player that is interesting or compelling because they are a silent protagonist, and unfortunately that often means that they have no way of expressing themselves. Kind of the value of, or what I view as being the value of a silent protagonist, is that it's a great way for the player to become the character in essence, right? Like, you have Half-Life 1. One of the great things about Half-Life 1 is that because of the systems they built into that game, you effectively are Gordon Freeman, because you, as a player character, get to make decisions that inform who Gordon Freeman is, and those gameplay decisions also loop back into, or those like light narrative decisions kind of loop back into the gameplay, because it's like, hey, there are scientists running around, there are security guards running around, or whatever. You can choose to help them, you can choose to kill them, you can, or you can leave them be and let them die. And those are all like very light decisions that kind of inform a bit of who Gordon Freeman's character is. Is he a raging psychopath? Is he a raging psychopath? Is he just like this? Is he like compassionate, or like whatever it happens to be? Like, those moment-to-moment gameplay decisions you can make have like, slight tangible benefits for you, because you kill scientists, you can get a little healing vial. Maybe the scientist will heal you if you save him, or he'll lead you to like a stash of resources you can get access to, or whatever. But in that way, the silent protagonist works because there are gameplay decisions that have narrative ties the player can make that effectively inform who the character that the player is playing as is. On the flip side of that, you have like what are supposed to be predefined characters, but who are silent, that really effectively have no character at all. There is no the game makes no effort to characterize who you are playing as, and from a gameplay perspective, there's nothing more than you're shooting enemies or whatever, and none of that really tells you anything about who you are playing as. On the flip side of that, there is kind of what Doom 2016 and Eternal do, and they're kind of like the odd exceptions where it's like they have a silent protagonist, but through how they convey the information through his expressions and through how he uses his hands, they're able to communicate just so much through that it's yes, he is a silent protagonist, and yes, you the player can't technically do a ton to effectively project yourself into the game and who that character is, but whilst he is a predefined character, and even though he doesn't talk, they kind of found other ways to convey his character to you. And then you have the other side of that, which is what you have voiced protagonists. And Carolyn kind of falls squarely into that, where it's you, the player, are not Carolyn. There is a very distinct disconnect between who Carolyn is and you are. You are simply experiencing Viscerafest through Carolyn's eyes, and as a result, a lot of the game is effectively really kind of tailored to, to basically make you kind of experience things through how Carolyn would. Carolyn is a very brash, reckless character, and so the combat is effectively, is very frantic. She's a very frantic, brash, I would say almost thrill-seeking type character. And the combat is in essence kind of made to mirror that to an extent, where it's you have to play in what would normally be a very risky way if you want to survive or to be good at the game and not die. There's sorry, excuse me. But yeah, so it's you have a predefined character who you are inhabiting and who you are simply experiencing the game through, as opposed to otherwise,
Geralt of Rivia.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind too when talking about Carolyn's character is that in a lot of ways, I would almost say she is in the same vein of a build engine character, and I do mean that on a deeper level than just she says one-liners and stuff. Because kind of the way I view the build engine game's protagonist, because a lot of people say that one-dimensional cardboard cutouts or whatever, stereotypes, but for me, kind of the way I've always viewed the build engine protagonist is they're a perfect reflection of the games they're in, right? Who is Duke Nukem? Duke Nukem is this incredibly egotistical, womanizing, violence-seeking protagonist who constantly spouts references and one-liners to everything, and you could almost exactly describe the game Duke Nukem like that, and similarly with Lo Wang and with Caleb from Blood, and I think to a certain extent that exists on a deeper level with Carolyn, because there is more to her character that we haven't really revealed yet. But again, it is meant to sort of a lot of her character and who she is also meant to be a mirror reflection of the game in a way. And yeah.
There are these little subtle moments where Duke Nukem shows that he has a heart, right? Mm-hmm. And most people just kind of Duke 3D. That's about it.
Yeah.
In Duke Nukem Time to Kill, the whole plot of the game is that these aliens turn his favorite strip club into a gay bar. Mm-hmm. And he's not okay with it. And he goes back in time to fix it.
I didn't know that.
And this would never get, rightfully so, wouldn't get over today. But I mean, there is a depth and a motivation to that character, not because that's canonically who he is or anything, but because people, as you said, sort of look into it in different ways. Like they experience it in different ways, and they like resonate with him for different reasons. And I think that's what makes any character like this, like it's almost purposefully one-dimensional, not because it's meant to be one-dimensional, but because you can easily like project on it in different ways. I mean, Link is probably the ultimate example of this in all video games, where it's like, what's special about Link? Well, he never fucking talks. So you can just project yourself completely onto him and try to be in and inhabit. What would you do if you were Link? How would you respond to this question that Zelda's asking you or whatever? That kind of goes away, from Skyward Sword on, but like, the vast majority of the Zelda franchise takes and plays with that. Maybe not intentionally. Maybe it's a total accident. Same thing with Doom Guy. Same thing with blah, blah, you name it. I don't know, man. I hope whatever you got cooking up in your head comes out exactly the way that you want people to interpret it. But I know that won't be the case.
Oh yeah, it's always difficult. But yeah, no, like it's I would say like by far one of the most difficult things we're struggling with in terms of doing the writing for Viscerafest is like basically forever now we've had like the general like story of Viscerafest plotted out, and and whilst we've had like those general beats down, the difficult thing becomes, okay, how do you give the player all the relevant information without like sitting them down and constantly doing an exposition dump? Like, how do you convey what the player needs to know and understand, and what's okay for the player to not know and understand? It is always like, I would say, the most difficult thing. Like basically, like it's difficult because especially in Viscerafest, it's like the story can't get in the way of the game too much to the extent that it becomes obnoxious. But at the same time, and on top of that, we have to work in like within financial limitations and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like, we have goals in terms of what we're trying to communicate and what we want players to be able to know and understand. And a lot of the difficulty we're running into now with the writing is like, okay, well, now we've got this point where it's like, okay, how do we make sure the player knows what they need to know? And how do we make sure the player understands what they need to know? Because now things are starting to get more complicated, and basically we're having to answer like questions that we've kind of built up throughout the course of the game, whether that be about Carolyn, whether that be about the United Scientific Conglomerate, whether that be about Chromium, and it's difficult when you're the person writing this stuff because you can't view it from an outside perspective, because it's like, I know everything. I can't listen to a piece of dialogue and figure out like what assumptions a person is going to make, especially because everybody's so different and they can take something completely different away from any piece of information. Like actually, great example, ending of chapter 1, there's the end cut scene where Chromium is confronted by a character that I can't talk about. So spoiler warning, I guess. But so basically there's that moment. And like internally, when we showed that bit off, like nobody realized that was Chromium, because whilst like he had been talking throughout most of chapter 1, there hadn't been enough of a visual connection yet for people to realize, oh, this is what Chromium looks like. And so we kind of had to lay some breadcrumbs in there to try and like, hey, how do we convey this character is this character? Mm-hmm. And we made some tweaks, and it's significantly better now. I don't think anybody's confused with who he is not reaching that moment. But like, it's an example of where it's like, okay, well, there's a slight misjudgment in terms of like, how do we convey what people need to know? And how do we convey it in a way where they don't need to like be sitting there like internalizing every single piece of dialogue? It's it's a very interesting process, the writing process. It's just, it's, I think the best way I can put it is like we're just facing challenges right now that are certainly things that we haven't had to an extent deal with before, and it's I would say I'm pretty happy with how everything is coming out, and internally as like we've been talking to people and showing stuff off, like people become like, ooh, like really. But it's it's difficult, as all things tend to be.
One of the first things that you like mentioned earlier when you're saying like, you know, when I talk to new developers, my first order of business is to say like, do something small, do something simple.
Yes.
Don't do what I'm doing. I'm working with Call of Ragnar right now, and which is the epitome of like, this game is too goddamn big. You know, like we
is that the roguelike one?
It's not a roguelike. It's a I don't know if you ever played Betrayal at Krondor or like.
I was thinking of something completely different. I was thinking of like that very, very yellow roguelite for some reason. I don't remember what it's called.
I'm gonna feel like a jackass if I don't just like call it off the top of my head, but it's not.
It's very, very yellow.
Point being that Sir Ragnar is it's like a very much like an old school like RPG adventure game, you know, and that involves like this gigantic world, you know, that exists, you know, canonically within whatever the character happens to be playing within, you know, and that's fun. But like one of the biggest appealing things to me when I talked to Damian initially about like, okay, let's work on this together, was he's like, oh, I've already gotten the whole story written out. Like, here it is. Like, this is, we have a Bible that we're going to abide by. You know, we'll have different changes gameplay wise or whatever here and there, but like, this is what we're abiding to because this is my vision. And all I want to do, my whole task is to make that happen. I do not envy your position of like just this constant, like, I don't know, man. Like, if people want to hear more about Carolyn, let's make it up. Let's write some more story to it. Like, that's scary. That is scary.
And well, the thing is, we have had, like I said, for the longest time, we've had like most of the stuff blotted out. Like, I could have written the ending for Viscerafest like 2 years ago. And if I were to come back to it now, there would probably only be like minor changes made. And it would probably be mostly like fixing like some of the dialogue up and some of that stuff. It wouldn't be like, oh, I have to completely rewrite this. Like the basic pillars have like for the story have been there for a decently long time. It's more so that there are always like, with anything like narratively speaking, that's like always work in progress. It's like, it's more so like taking those general pillars and solidifying those to like moments in the game. You know, it's like taking, to use an example from chapter 1, it's like taking that moment where you go through the Urk Gate into Wayward Watchers. It's like, that was original. You know, it's like, I always knew that moment was going to happen. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be like when it happened, though, and I didn't know how we were going to handle some of like the writing stuff for that, and how was that going to manifest in game. It ended up becoming its own level when I was only planning it to be like a small chunk of another level, like it's that kind of thing where it's like, I know what's going to happen, and you know, occasionally I will add some things here or there to like make something clearer, or to improve various elements of the narrative that, but like the general like structure of the narrative has always been there. It's just that, like I said, here or there we've had to make adjustments or changes. And in regards to like the Carolyn stuff and diving more into that, like I said, like there is already an extent to where we were hinting at where that was going. It's just that that was going, if we were ever going to get around to tackling that, it was going to be in a different story.
Right.
But it's honestly almost worked out better that we tackle it in this story, because I think the problem that would have arisen if we were to like say, hey, tackle that in the sequel or something like that, is it's like it to an extent it might have almost, even if like we hinted at it in the first game, it would have felt like, oh, this is what we were building. Like, you know, like when you're watching a movie and in a sequel they reveal some new piece of information and you're like, were they planning for that from the beginning? I don't think they were planning for that from the beginning or whatever. And we were, but you know, that's like one of the concerns that comes up is it's like, well, you know, we weren't, because we were only hinting at it, and even though it was extremely narratively relevant, and quite frankly, we probably should have included it from the beginning. Again, we just didn't for financial and for financial reasons mostly. Even though we had that planned out from the beginning, it just fits better here than it would have if we were to address it later. Right. It's it's hard to go too far beyond that without diving into the spoilers of what they actually are. I will say I'm very excited for people to see it. It's so satisfying when you've been working on something for as long as I have, and you've been slow, and it's like you get to this point where you're working on something for as long as I have, where it almost feels like it's never going to be done. It's never going to get finished. You're never even going to see this thing that you have in your head. You're never going to see what that's going to get to look like. And so to be able to get to this point where it's like I said, like we're in the midst of working on that stuff right now. Like I wouldn't be shocked if my artist Marika is like working on some of the cutscene stuff that I'm very vaguely alluding to. But it's so satisfying to get to a point where it's like I can see the end of the tunnel. I can see what everything I've been working toward is going to look like. And in a way, it's almost bittersweet, because it's like, you know, I have been working on this for so long, and it's been a part of my life for so long, that to get to this point, it's like, even though the end of the development is still quite a ways away, probably another year or so, it's still like, man, like all this stuff I've planned for is like finally coming to fruition. Like I'm finally gonna get to see this thing that's been in my head for so long. And yeah, it's just like I said, it's bittersweet. And I'm incredibly excited for people to see it. Like, I'm very, very proud of like what we on the team have done. I can say like pretty much everyone who like knows what we're doing is very excited for it to get finished. Just because like it's gonna be something. But yeah,
I'm mostly excited for it. Like I really want to see this game through and everything. That's going to be awesome. But a person like you with as much just like raw talent and like brain power as you clearly have, I want to see what you do after this is said and done. Mm-hmm. And you have learned all the lessons you've learned along the way. What do you do next? That's going to be...
What are we going to do next at Viscerafest? Well, obviously I don't have a clear
sophomore album. You know what I mean?
I don't have a clear answer for that. The big difficulty going forward after Viscerafest is a lot of my life situation is going to dictate whether or not I can afford to keep doing this. 1C has vocally shown interest in working with us in future. They literally... Anton, one of our main connections at 1C, he basically asked me, what are you guys going to do after Viscerafest? Once the game is all done, you know, once we've done like our post-launch support and everything like that, what are your plans? And they've basically like, you know, they want to keep working with us, and I would love to do that. But a lot of that is going to hinge on how financially successful Viscerafest is going to be. Because by the time Viscerafest by the time Viscerafest is going to be done, I'm going to be 23, and I'm still going to be in my parents' house, and I'm going to be wanting to move out by that point, and they're going to be wanting me to move out by that point. So, like, a lot of it's going to become, can I support myself with this? Can I afford to keep doing this? And if I can, me and Elijah have been discussing potential future projects together. The next thing we're going to be doing is probably going to be not significantly smaller in scope, but from a development standpoint, smaller in scope.
That's the important point.
Because
you can do more with less, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we realized that, especially like what may appear from the outset to be relatively simple, on a development standpoint, is incredibly complex. And at least for our next thing, we want to kind of have a hump project before we tackle the next really big thing.
Mm-hmm.
We are, to an extent, excited to work on that, because it is, we're excited to work on that just because, like, now that we have, and it's like, basically, Viscerafest development has been an absolute mess. Like, I was a 12-year-old, and, like, stuff that I started then and the decisions I made then are still having an impact now. We're still feeling like there's, like, this slight bit of disorganization internally, and it's like, now that we have, like, a team set up, and now that we know what we're doing, and now that we're at least somewhat organized, it's like, going into a next project, it's exciting because it's like, we basically get to start from the ground up, and we get to be much more mentally and literally organized in terms of what we're doing, and we get to have, like, we know how to work together now. There's not as much of a learning process, and we're not going to be feeling as much as the impact of the learning process as we are with what is effectively my first game and Elijah's, like, he's worked on smaller games before, but like, having that, like, this is established now and we can move forward, and in general, like, get more done and be more organized, is something we're really looking forward to being able to do. As much as we love Viscerafest, and as much as we're excited to see Viscerafest through to the end, at the same time, we're also, if we have that chance to keep going with this, we're looking forward to being more established and better working together as a team, in a way where, again, we can be more organized. We can have a much clearer understanding of what we're doing and work on things together from the beginning, rather than him jumping in, like, halfway through. I would say, obviously, the future is always uncertain, especially nowadays. But we're excited for, at least for what it will bring, and we're hopeful. Again, I can't thank the people who have been supporting us enough. Like, our community has grown substantially, and it would be wonderful if we get to keep doing this. So, yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to what you do. Like, as I said, a little bit ago, but dude, I can't wait till that interview, like, 30 years from now, and it's like, let's talk about your early work.
Yeah.
Remember when you did Viscerafest and you're just like, oh yes, like, that was.
I'm not going to remember any of it.
No, I want you to sound like Tim Willits.
How old was I? 15.
Oh yeah, like that monumentally gigantic game that I worked on 30 years ago. Like, you're gonna be fine, dude. I know you clearly, you have the talent, you have the vision. It's just a matter of, like, you getting it all organized, and you're already 90% there. You're learning a lot of shit right now, and I am too. We're gonna be moving through this industry in tandem, hopefully. And I hope we cross paths many, many times in the future, especially when the next update to it, Viscerafest, comes out, and we can talk about
I thought you were going to say Next Realms Deep.
we'll talk about each other. You know, we'll see each other next Realms Deep, obviously, but like, hopefully between now and then, we don't have to take a year between every podcast.
Yeah.
It's up to you.
Yeah.
You better have something before next Realms Deep. Jesus Christ.
We probably will. Because Chapter 2 is going to come out pretty early next year. So, by that point, we should have a decent amount of stuff for Chapter 3 done. Enough that
Holding you to it.
enough that we should have a little something to show off. The big issue with when kind of like Realms Deep was being organized this year is like we were like in the middle of working on the very first level of Chapter 2. So it's like we didn't really have anything to show by that point, at least nothing that was like publicly presentable. I would have loved to, but yeah, it wasn't ready on time. So I'm hoping next year we'll have at least a little something to show.
All I can do is say that I've learned a lot from the past 2 years of Realms Deep, and I no matter what format it ends up being next year, I don't know what the COVID situation will be, but
yeah,
I do promise that I will come back a better event organizer than I have been for 2 years.
Yeah, and hopefully we can finally have that barbecue or whatever Fred's been talking about.
Man. Yeah, we'll.
I would love to do that. I don't know if I'd be able to because I'm in the States and they're way over.
They're in Aalborg, Denmark.
Yeah, in Denmark. So I mean, who knows? I might not be able to fly over there. I would absolutely love to, though. That would be really fun.
I would love to have you there, man. It's an amazing time. Really, it's a beautiful little what they call a big city in Denmark is like 120,000 people. So it's cute.
Yeah.
But it's wholesome. It's nice. I like it there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we'll touch base, dude. Please, of course, like reach out anytime you want. Even if you don't have anything to show, man, just like you want to touch tips. I'm always here.
Oh no!
And I can't promise my sleep schedule at least for the next few months. Like, my sleep schedule is going to be fucked up, but after that, I promise I'll be a lot more available and a lot more.
Yeah. Well, I don't want it to be every other interview you're having.
That's fine too. I don't care. I have like MK Schmidt. I'll have that dude anytime he wants. Like Star Explorers. I don't know if you've played his game. You should if you haven't. But
what is it called?
Star Explorers.
Oh, that yeah. Dude, I have not played it, but
it doesn't matter how you feel about the game. Mike is like the most interesting person, and I would talk to him for hours and record it every time. Like every single conversation I have with that guy is just like, holy shit! I just like learned a million new things about life. He's a grown ass man with 7 children.
Oh, God.
He's a professional artist. Like he's a painter who decided in his like he's my mom's age,
yeah,
and just decided I'm gonna make video games and just fucking did it. Like and kind of similar to you, because Star Explorers was like a long development process, like just took forever. And regardless, I love that game, but I get it's
niche,
hodgepodge niche kind of thing. The passion that is more important to me than the game. Almost like 90% of the time, it's like if I can really see why someone loves what they do, fuck it, we're talking about it. That's what's cool. That's what the podcast is about.
Yeah.
So I'll catch up with you later, though. I have to go to sleep.
Yeah. I'll let you do that.
Take care, man.
You too, man.
If you haven't already, make sure you head over to Steam or GOG or whatever the fuck you like to buy games on. Grab yourself that early access copy of Viscerafest. You won't be sorry. It kicks ass. Thank you to Awesreek for being part of the show again. It's just really lightens my heart to see how far he's come and knowing how far he's going to go. It's been a bit of a process getting back, used to doing the thing, like the normal thing is after REM sleep and all that. And fuck, it's a lot. I promise we got a lot of really cool things coming up over the course of the next several months. I think you're all gonna be very happy. Do some interviews with all of the developers working on the In the Keep games and shit like that. Just to kind of keep everybody in the loop. If you like the show, or if you like In the Keep, period, anything that we do, whether we do streams, the games, the podcasts, whatever, you probably also like to go to inthekeep.com and check out all the stuff we got there. We got merchandise, we've got other podcasts that I produce, such as Doom is Dead with the multiplayer Doom Federation, and also Burning Bridges with my man Bridge Burner. So those are great. You should definitely check them out, especially if you love Doom, because they both talk a lot about Doom. Bridge Burner show is mostly about level design as a whole, not necessarily just because he specializes in Doom. And you can also find links on the website to support, if you want to. Just got to say thanks to all the people who currently do, and these are just the ones who do it monetarily, not just, you can't pretend like the people who are helping out in the background, all the apostles and In the Keep, you want to know who they are, go to In the Keep's Discord, which is also on the website. But these folks right here: Shannon, Ben, Bridge, Anthony, Mike, Zan, Lord Revan, Fred, Brandy, Jack, Robert, Graceless Dragon, Red Eyes, Brad, Dots, Moose, Paul, the entire Flam Fam, Agrox Simon, and Immorpher. Thank you all for putting your money or your content where your mouth is. We really appreciate you. God damn. The song that you're hearing in the background right now is from the Viscerafest soundtrack. I believe this one is by Marquee Motherfucking Music. Definitely go check him out and all that stuff. But, just getting back in gear, man. We have so much coming up. We'll be back next week with the guys behind White Hell, Migo, and Projab. Till then, I love you. Cathala loves you. Stay in the Keep.